back in April, during its operations in the Red Sea against the Yemeni Ansar Allah group, commonly known as the Houthis, the US unexpectedly suffered the loss of an FA-18E Super Hornet aircraft. The plane was reportedly being towed by the Nimitz-class aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman via a tow tractor, when the massive ship suddenly shifted its course, resulting in the tow tractor losing control and both it and the FA-18 falling into the ocean. The sharp turn that caused a $60 million jet to fall overboard was reportedly an evasive maneuver to avoid a Houthi missile or drone attack. Now, there's no evidence that, despite greatly strengthening their anti-ship capabilities over the past decade, with no shortage of help from Iran, the Houthis actually have the capabilities to successfully target and cause major damage to, or even sink as mighty a craft as a US aircraft carrier. The Truman successfully avoided the strike after all, albeit at serious cost both financially and reputationally. But the incident did raise an ongoing question that speaks to the very essence of the US's military power. In a new age of drones, hypersonic missiles and ubiquitous surveillance, is one of the symbols of US military dominance, and arguably its most expensive piece of hardware, now obsolete? Are these giant ships, for so long an unmatched instrument of power projection, now just enormous floating coffins? It's an important question, with the US in the midst of a $120 billion upgrade to its aircraft carrier fleet. So let's investigate whether the claims have any merit. The answer may surprise you. In the face of it, it's fair to ask whether aircraft carriers are obsolete. They've been around for a long time. Navies have been building ships capable of carrying aircraft for well over a century. But the world's first purpose-built aircraft carrier, the 552-foot Hosho, debuted in 1922 when it entered service with the Imperial Japanese Navy. Hosho had all the classic features of an aircraft carrier that appear to this day. It had a raised island for directing flight operations, a resting gear to recover landing airplanes, a vast hangar for storing and maintaining aircraft, and elevators for shuttling aircraft and ordnance topside from the hangar below. Most importantly, it had a full-length flight deck, a simple flat surface that extended from bow to stern, providing functionality just like the runway of a conventional airfield. By the time of the Second World War, aircraft carriers were also fielded by the US and UK, and had become an indispensable part of wartime operations for all three nations. Onboard biplane fighters, reconnaissance planes, torpedo-dropping aircraft, and the infamous Japanese kamikaze dive bombers used at Pearl Harbor enabled these navies to conduct warfare far from their borders in a variety of theaters. Before the advent of the carrier, the battleship had ruled the seas, but that era arguably came to an end with the destruction of so much of the US battleship fleet at Pearl Harbor. Aircraft carriers could operate from hundreds of miles away, much further than the range of even the largest anti-ship guns. This meant aircraft carriers could fight over much greater distances than battleships, bring greater firepower to bear against the enemy without putting themselves within the range of enemy guns, and attack targets farther inland. By the time of the famous Battle of Midway in June 1942, which was fought almost entirely from aircraft carriers, it was evident that the age of the flat top had arrived. Yet, it didn't take long before critics were predicting its demise, particularly due to the development of nuclear weapons, jet engines, and guided missiles. These developments meant that carriers were easy to target and more difficult to defend, and it was only a matter of time before they ended up in Davy Jones's locker with billions of dollars and thousands of lives lost. Or so the story went. Fast forward half a century, and it's a similar refrain being heard today. Ukraine has demonstrated how effective low-cost aerial and naval drones can be against a much larger naval force. For example, in early 2024, Ukrainian Magura naval drone strikes sank the Russian landing ship Caesar Kunikov and patrol ship Sergei Kotov. In May 2025, Ukraine reported destroying a high-end Russian Neva radar system and supply depots on Black Sea gas platforms using a coordinated aerial and naval drone strike. These and other incidents caused Russia's previously much vaunted Black Sea fleet to have to turn tail and flee to relatively safer waters much further away from Ukraine along Russia's Black Sea coast. Of course, comparing an aging Russian patrol boat or landing ship to a US aircraft carrier is like comparing a quad bike to a Lamborghini. As we'll see shortly, you would likely need dozens of Maguras to even make a dent on a US aircraft carrier, and possibly thousands to cause any serious damage. However, Ukraine's use of sea drones highlights how modern technology is again changing the profile of the threats that carriers must contend with, and there are much nastier new weapons than sea drones to add to the mix. In addition to their strategic nuclear arsenals, Russia, China, and North Korea are all thought to have tactical nuclear warheads, smaller in size and power, but likely large enough to disable or even sink an aircraft carrier with a single direct strike in a critical part of the ship. Moreover, China in particular has been developing weapons specifically for use against US aircraft carriers. One missile that's received significant attention, particularly from the US Navy itself, is the Chinese DF-21D anti-ship missile. The DF-21D is a medium-range missile with an estimated combat range of over 1,300 miles and a highly accurate inertial guidance system. The missile is 35 feet long with a diameter of 4.6 feet and has a launch weight of 32,400 pounds with a 1,322-pound payload. The launcher for this nuclear-capable missile is road mobile, giving it a measure of shoot-and-scoot capability. It also uses solid propellant fuel, which is more efficient than liquid-fueled missiles, which require time to fill with fuel. It's the kind of weapon that the US Navy takes seriously, especially since China has been testing it at notional targets since at least 2014. More recently, China deployed the DF-21D launcher in the Gobi Desert during a war game and fired 2 missiles to simulate the destruction of at least one aircraft carrier. And there are other new anti-carrier weapons too. During its grand military parade to celebrate the 80th anniversary of victory during World War II in October, China showcased new anti-ship missiles dubbed YJ-15, YJ-17, YJ-19 and YJ-20. YJ stands for Ying-Ji, which translates as Eagle Strike. In other words, these missiles are made to strike at the heart and soul of America, symbolized by the eagle. Not too much is known about these weapons yet, but experts speculate that they're likely to be ramjet or scramjet hypersonic projectiles that can be maneuvered in flight, and US air defenses may not be able to bring them down. US air and ship defenses have also not yet been combat tested against Russia's most advanced anti-ship missile, the supposedly hypersonic Zircon. And if it turns out that its Poseidon nuclear-powered, nuclear-capable stealth underwater drone torpedo hybrid does what Russian President Vladimir Putin claims it can, it could theoretically sneak under an aircraft carrier's most critical regions and detonate a tactical nuclear warhead with devastating results. It's precisely these emerging threats that have caused the recent upsurge in claims that aircraft carriers are now obsolete, and thus the $120 billion Gerald R. Ford-class program is a gigantic waste of money. Some have argued, for example, that instead of prioritizing large-budget shipbuilding projects like the 10 Ford-class carriers at a cool $13 billion each, the US Navy should be placing greater priority on naval drones and other new much less costly technologies. Although increasing annually, the budget for such items still pales in comparison. The sinking of just a single Nimitz-class carrier with all of its aircraft and equipment on board would likely represent a loss of hundreds of billions of dollars, not to mention up to 6,000 lives. So, just how dangerous are these new threats? Are the US's aircraft carriers in mortal danger of being badly damaged, if not sunk? The short answer is no. As one technician who works aboard a US aircraft carrier puts it, it's still the safest place you can be, safer than at home. There are several reasons for this. The first is due to its enormous size and weight, 100,000 tons, and the fact that it can move at a decent clip, in excess of 30 knots or 35 miles per hour. Even with in-flight guidance adjustment, it's really not easy for missiles moving at supersonic or hypersonic speeds to hit a moving target. As proven during the incident with the Houthis mentioned earlier, despite its massive size, the US's aircraft carriers can pull off a variety of evasive maneuvers in a short space of time if required. The next issue that an attack would have to overcome is that a US aircraft carrier is anything but defenseless. In fact, it arguably has the most comprehensive defenses of any military system on the planet. On board, the US's Nimitz-class carriers carry the Phalanx close-in system and have been upgraded with evolved Sea Sparrow missile or ESSM and Rolling Airframe Missile or RAM missile systems, advanced radar and electronic warfare suites. The new Ford-class carriers' defences are even more advanced and comprehensive, including 2 Mk-29 missile launchers with 8 ESSMs each, 2 rolling airframe missile launchers, and 4 Phalanx close-in weapon systems for layered point defence. Additionally, the Ford-class has the C-RAM missile system, and its extensive electrical power generation, 600 MW from 2 A1B reactors, provides the capacity to integrate future directed energy weapons such as free electron laser systems. So, the US's carriers are more than capable of detecting, targeting and shooting down most of what heads its way. That's if incoming missiles even get close enough for the carrier to have to defend itself in the first place. That's because carriers don't travel alone. They travel in carrier strike groups, which increase both their offensive and defensive capabilities by orders of magnitude. Each of the US's 11 carriers has an attached strike group, including core elements for air, surface and undersea warfare, as well as logistics support. That means the group has no dependency on host countries or airstrips. It brings everything needed for sustained operations, no matter where it goes. The centerpiece of the strike group is, of course, the carrier, along with its onboard carrier air wing, or CVW, consisting of 65 to 70 aircraft, including FA-18 Hornets, F-35C Lightning IIs, E-2D Hawkeyes, and MH-60 helicopters, some of the world's most advanced aircraft. This combination provides offensive strike, air defense, and reconnaissance capabilities for a huge range of operations. The group also typically includes one Ticonderoga-class cruiser equipped with the Aegis combat system, providing long-range air defense, anti-surface warfare, and Tomahawk missile strike capability. The cruiser is usually accompanied by a destroyer squadron of 2 to 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, providing anti-air, anti-submarine, and anti-surface warfare, as well as Tomahawk missile strike capability. In case anyone was thinking that they might have more success underwater against this formidable grouping, it also typically includes 1 or 2 nuclear-powered attack submarines. These are used for anti-submarine warfare, intelligence gathering, and long-range strike missions, adding stealth and depth to the group's defense. Finally, the group will include a host of support ships, including at least 1 combined ammunition, oiler, and supply ship, AOE/AOR for short, such as a supply-class vessel. These ships provide critical logistics support, including fuel, ammunition, and provisions to sustain operations at sea. The whole group is led by a rear admiral situated in the lower half of the carrier, who commands the entire group with integrated command and control functions that enable coordinated operations across all platforms. So, before an incoming missile or torpedo can get near a US carrier, it'll first need to somehow get past all of that. With all that power on the water and all those planes able to be scrambled to defend from the air, the chances of a single missile getting through are as remote as Tristan da Cunha. It would likely take a very large, very expensive sustained barrage to deplete the interceptor missile defenses of the entire group to the point that missiles could get through. Even then, it's extremely unlikely that a single hit, or even a couple of hits, even with a DF-21 or Zircon, would be sufficient to put an aircraft carrier out of action, let alone sink one. Back in 2005, the US military conducted a sink exercise test, using the decommissioned USS America for target practice to test the defensive capabilities of US carriers, with the aim of guiding the development of future super carriers. The ship was bombarded repeatedly and hammered in a variety of attacks, but it withstood 4 weeks of intense bombardment before it was finally sunk. And even then, despite images showing the carrier's bow deeply buried below the waterline, with waves coming up to the middle of the ship, the rest of the ship still looks more or less intact. Bottom line, the US builds its carriers to be able to sustain heavy damage in combat and still stay afloat, and it builds them well. There are 4 elements to this durability. First, the aircraft carrier is protected by high-strength steel plating, with its deck made of steel sheets. Second, due to its size, the aircraft carrier is incredibly buoyant, making it almost impossible to sink. Third, all vital systems such as control are duplicated on an aircraft carrier, meaning a successful hit can't incapacitate it. And fourth, the nuclear power plants and weapons that would cause the most devastating secondary explosions are located deep in the underwater part of the carrier and protected by powerful armor. As for the ship's fuel, it's located in the bladders or tanks floating alongside the ship, not on it. Indeed, there are usually dozens of bombs and planes loaded with fuel on the carrier's deck, and if all of that detonates, the ship will undoubtedly take serious damage. However, the aircraft carrier has a powerful deck fire extinguishing system to deal with fires that can quickly spread. What that all means is that it would take multiple direct missile hits to make a strong impression on an aircraft carrier. According to Russian military expert Alexei Lenkov, with reference to Zircon missiles, 10 missiles will not sink an aircraft carrier. There'll be damage, most likely it will suffer, but it's completely within the capabilities of the American aircraft carriers to return to their bases on their own. The Chinese missiles may be more powerful, but without multiple hits on the same critically important point on the carrier, incredibly difficult if it's performing evasive maneuvers while being attacked, the damage is also unlikely to be terminal. Military analyst Bulgarian military even cast doubt on whether an indirect nuclear blast would be enough to take down a carrier. The aircraft carrier is sealed against weapons of mass destruction. Its steel walls keep out gamma radiation. The fire suppression system will wash the radiation off the deck. A charge of 300 kilotons, which will explode at a distance of 1 kilometer, 0.6 miles, will not be able to cause serious damage to the ship, they wrote in 2023. They and other experts suggest that a more effective method of targeting a carrier may be underwater by means of torpedoes, instead of with missiles and drones through the air. As military analyst Boyko Nikolov, writing for BulgarianMilitary.com, put it, TE-2 torpedoes are a good option because they can only hit the underwater part of an aircraft carrier. Missiles are not good for this. However, to really penetrate the ship's armor, about 10 or even 20 new TE-2 torpedoes would be needed. The fact is that the Nimitz-class aircraft carrier has a 6-meter, 19.6-foot torpedo defense. It's a 3-chamber system that extinguishes the blast, so you have to continuously hit the same point repeatedly. With torpedoes, that's probably not feasible. Still, as it was back in the late 1940s, when the doomsayers were predicting the imminent obsolescence of that generation of aircraft carriers, the US hasn't disregarded the disruptive technological changes that are afoot today. The storied history of the aircraft carrier has been one of identifying, embracing, and adapting to these changes. Nuclear weapons, jet engines, and guided missiles went from being threats to an aircraft carrier to threats posed by it. And there's a very similar process taking place today. The US's aircraft carriers are precisely what have enabled it to project power to all corners of the planet simultaneously. There is no other weapon system or configuration that comes remotely close to the power this enables the US to project, not just militarily, but also as a diplomatic tool, and even for humanitarian purposes. So, rather than abandoning them, the US is again adapting and upgrading them for a new era of warfare. As the Navy itself acknowledges, the changing face of warfare means that protecting large carriers in contested waters will now require advanced defensive layers and a totally new doctrine. In particular, the $13 billion Ford-class carriers currently being assembled to replace the US's aging Nimitz-class carriers. As AI, unmanned systems, and integrated cross-platform, cross-domain coordination change the face of warfare, the Ford-class carriers are being reinvented as a floating drone and man-unmanned operations hub with totally unmatched global reach. Both the vessel and its support infrastructure are clearly being upgraded for the drone age. The Navy is deploying the MQ-25 Stingray carrier-based refueling drone and is working toward integrating unmanned combat air vehicles into the carrier air wing. The carrier's electromagnetic aircraft launch system and advanced arresting gear were chosen in part to accommodate both unmanned aircraft and manned jets. But even beyond that, the entire project has been conceived with reach and flexibility in mind, and no other platform even comes close. Unmanned systems, whether aerial, surface or subsurface, expand an army's reach in ways that weren't previously possible. However, drones alone can't replicate the power projection capacity of a 100,000-ton forward-deployed floating fortress in international waters. With the Ford class, the Navy intends to have the best of both worlds, and that means the aircraft carrier is likely to remain the king of power projection for decades to come, even if its weapon systems become unrecognizable as technology keeps evolving. Now, subscribe to the military channel to stay informed about all the most important new developments in the world of naval warfare and military matters in general. Thanks for watching.